do you have any success stories or other things as they're kind of, wanting to implement these? Or is it kind of like, okay, yeah, that was great, and then I'm going to go back to my junk food when I get home?
um, so, well, in terms of the classes itself, I always tell people that, here's my email. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out and contact me. Just because there's always going to be the times where you get hung up on something in the kitchen, and providing them that resource. You know, I get a ton of feedback from dinners. I mean, it's interesting. I was just on the West Coast, and I was actually speaking at one of the classes that I went to when I was studying there, and I was talking to my professor, and she came to one of my dinners that I did when I lived in LA, and she was talking to me about how like one of the dishes that I did was one, like her favorite dish she's ever had. And then, but more importantly, she talked about how she felt after the dinner. We have this, because our body's looking for a certain amount of nutrients every time it eats, and almost never does it find all those nutrients, so we overeat. The reason we're over consuming is our body, it's delayed in letting us know that we're full, and we end up being full. We're not satiated. What we should be doing is satiating ourselves and providing a certain amount of nutrients that our body needs every time we eat. But right now we're just over consuming, we're stuffing ourselves. And so food comas and food babies, or whatever these terms are that we use, it shouldn't be a thing. We shouldn't feel sluggish. We should feel good after dinners. And that's always like this piece of feedback that I get, like whether it's the day after or running into someone months or years later, they're always like, like after that dinner, it's like, I felt so good, and I've never forgotten that feeling. That all being said, most of the people I talk to, they might have made some changes, some shifts, but it's again, it's the reason why people have this like high vibration experience after a dinner that I do. I always usually give most of the credit to the farmer, because I'm using the best farmers. Sourcing is the most important factor in getting the nutrients and having the highest quality food possible. And so that there's a big challenge. And again, there's the real reason why I'm shifting more towards education and activism and advocacy for a healthier food, regenerative food system, because people can have these experiences, they can't really go out and replicate it again. Or if they do, it takes a lot of time and dedication. And so now it's more about like, how do we make it easier? So no, it is something where I think that for the most part, people really appreciate and enjoy and understand. And I think a lot of people, I mean, certainly people I've talked to have made certain changes, but it's very hard to recreate that experience that I've provided, given our current circumstances with the food system that we have.
Okay. Now, how would somebody replicate it? You talked a little bit about, like the fresh from the farm, things like that. I mean,
Sure.
depending on where you are in the world, if you're in a large city like New York or LA or London or elsewhere, you may or may not have access to those things versus, in a suburb or a rural area. So how does someone, I guess, regardless of their circumstance, to kind of start out with intuitive eating and intuitive cooking?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a bit of a challenging one, obviously, given our current environment. But again, just a couple nights ago when I was at UCLA, someone asked me a similar question, and she also tied it to the economics of it and how do you do it affordably, which is that much more challenging. But I am someone who really avoids all labels and diets and lifestyles, and instead I've boiled it down to three principles, like regardless of where you are, like whether you eat meat or not, for instance, like three principles, which is sourcing, diversity, and moderation. And I really don't think there is an argument out there that can prove that kind of concept in terms of eating wrong. So the key being sourcing, as I've mentioned, using the best farm produce possible or animal products possible. is key, but that's also the most challenging one. So if you're in a situation, a city, a rural community where, you know, your sourcing is like a supermarket that's not that great, you know, the sourcing part is going to be hard. So then you look at diversity and moderation, and diversity, again, that's getting back to you know, the need to have bitter and sour foods and more green foods. And you can really do that in any situation. I mean, unless you're like in a food desert. I mean, obviously there are some situations where it's really hard, but for the most part, diversity is available to us. And so, you know, for someone like me, instead of eating rice 5 days a week, it's doing barley, quinoa, amaranth. You know, there are definitely, you know, as much as we don't have a lot of diversity compared to what the plant kingdom and the world and the environment can offer us, we still have more diversity than most of us utilize. So diversifying your diet and trying different things and different combinations on a daily basis is really important. And then moderation goes hand in hand, just not over consuming certain things. And that can be as, you know, that can be as simple, but as important as, you know, the types of fat you use if you're cooking, you know, changing that up constantly. So if you're using olive oil a lot right now, well, you know, use different types of oil, and just making sure that the diversity and moderation parts are there. And, you know, unfortunately, the sourcing part really speaks to the nutrient content of food, but the very least that we can be doing is being mindful of diversity and moderation in the foods that we eat. And that's something I think that anybody in any circumstance they are in right now can start to look at, and you'll start to notice patterns. Again, if you just start to look at the foods that we eat, I mean, for the most part, our food system is dedicated to around like 60 different types of vegetables, when there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of varieties out there. So it's just really encouraging people to start looking at that. So we also can start to demand more diversity in our food system. So those are the principles I talk about, and I think they're applicable to any situation, in a good way to just start looking critically at your habits right now, and introducing diversity could be a great way, and sourcing when possible. You know, maybe you live in a place where you do have a farmer's market, but it's once a week, or your budget only allows you to go to the farmer's market once a week or once a month. But when you go, don't go and get blueberries, you know, go and get like that weird looking vegetable that you don't know what it is, and ask the farmer what it is and how to cook with it. I mean, farmers are great resources. If you can meet them at a market, they're always happy to share knowledge and information. So just kind of use those moments as exploration, and also Google's a great resource. I mean, you know, come home and you know, Google whatever it is that you found at the market and how to prepare it, or contact someone like myself and how do I work with this ingredient. So those are some simple ways I think that and just keeping that in the back of your mind, sourcing diversity and moderation.
So with the different events that you have, your just different dinner experiences, have you had any aha moments when people really recognize the connection between, you know, what they put into their body and how they feel?
So yeah, I think the aha moments are, you know, after these dinners that I do, you know, 7 courses, a lot of people come into these dinners knowing it's plant-based and questioning, you know, are they going to be full, or, you know, what they're suspicious, I think is fair to say a lot of the times. And you know, the aha moments, it's a combination of things. It's one, how you feel after, and that feeling of being full, like being satiated. So you feel content, but and you feel full, but you're not stuffed. And having that experience is an aha moment, but also, again, that narrative of tying in all of these pieces and talking about our history with food and food systems, and making these connections with food as medicine, It's that narrative while eating really, really high quality food. It's these pieces together that will have guests coming up afterwards and just, just thanking me for um, tying it all together, making the connections in these areas, and also showcasing that it can be done. I think a lot of times, we can talk about the changes we want to make or the issues that are that are present, and it's then the question becomes, how do we do it? And well, a lot of the things that I do are priced higher than what people can afford. At the very least, we are showcasing how it is possible and how we can do it, and the path forward, and really being able to, in one night, in one dinner, showcase where the future of food can and should be. And I think that people, when people see that and experience it, something certainly flips. A light switch flips. And again, now that challenge is, okay, if everybody in attendance here, or most of the people in attendance, are telling me that they want to eat this way, if like they had the abilities that I had, or they had me in their house 7 days a week, how do we do that? Like that's the goal. And that's obviously a massive mountain to climb, but at least we have a target. It's like, people, doesn't matter where they are, who they are, where they come from, what they eat now, they are willing to, or would like to eat like this. So how do we do it? And so that's really now the mission behind Plant I'm looking at right now.
Okay. So just kind of your events almost kind of spark their motivation to start intuitive eating or intuitive cooking.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's, I'm painting a picture and creating something that I can't say it enough, that it's hard to duplicate. It's hard to duplicate in the home kitchen. So that's why more and more I am focused on the education aspect, cooking classes, and then also just starting to build the infrastructure for us to be able to train our community, or what I would like to be seen as our community leaders, our physicians and doctors. Integrative and preventative medicine is booming. Doctors and physicians around the country and world are tired of prescribing, drugs and pills that clearly aren't making a difference. And they're, the data and the science is now behind food as medicine, and there is more and more of the medical field understanding this. So really starting to ride that wave, and then working with chefs. I mean, chefs are, the restaurant life is terrible. You're working 6-7 days a week, you're working 100 hours a week, you don't have health insurance. And so also starting to speak to that chef community of, we don't, ideally, going out to eat should be something special, something that you do for a special occasion. It's something like 60% or so of Americans eat out like once a week. Basically, the trend of eating out is just skyrocketing, and really have a healthy future, we need people back in the kitchen. So also talking to chefs about, there's better money and a better lifestyle for you yourself in educating and doing more work outside of the restaurant and outside of the constraints and the profit and loss world of restaurants, which is really brutal. And then everything I do, the number one priority is supporting local farmers, talking to them, understanding their needs, and encouraging people. So those three areas, pushing on those three areas, and talking to these communities, so that as people are open up to these experiences, we actually have community leaders and community resources for people to share that knowledge. And so that when somebody is exposed to the information that we're talking about here in this conversation, there's people that they can turn to within their communities that have that. And we're far from that at the moment, but it is building, that's what's exciting. This is a great time to be talking about and working in these areas, because I think we're just cresting this wave of understanding, um, the health epidemics, the autoimmune disease, all these things. We're really starting to make the connection that it's tied um, to food.
Sure. Now you mentioned that people would love to have you in their home 7 days a week cooking everything, but um, now because you're on the education end of it a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you help them to adapt, to use the knowledge they've learned in one of your events and then adapt it to their situation so they are motivated to try to do intuitive cooking? And
So if you're close to where I am, the cooking classes series is designed to give you the tools to be able to do it independently. Also, going to be really focusing on launching basically a digital service of that, so that people can connect remotely. And I'm excited about that specifically because I think there's a lot of power in connecting with people in their own home kitchens and understanding like what tools do you have in your kitchen. You know, some of the tools I rely on, some folks might not even have. And so being able to understand the situation they're in, where they can source food, um, as present, the tools that they have to execute. The first class that we do in the Plant Kingdom cooking class series is called the fundamentals. It's going over knives and kitchen equipment and pantry, and just kind of like, here are the basics that if you really want to dedicate some time to exploring the kitchen and learning how to cook, these are like the tools for basic setup. So I'm excited about that, and really being able to connect with people where they are and kind of those first like baby steps. But I also don't like the idea of calling it baby steps, because really, I mean, even if it's just an hour, I'm hopefully being able to set people up for um, providing those fundamental building blocks so that they can actually just start experimenting. And that's the other part of it, is, letting people know that it's a process, it's a journey. You're not going to change overnight. Your cooking skills aren't going to be perfect overnight. I like to talk about our food journey. Everybody has a food journey that's deeply personal. And so this is like the next step on your food journey. And just setting people up so that at the very least, they can go into the kitchen and attempt. And I mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've tried something that turned out that it tasted terrible. I mean, it happens to me all the time, but that's part of the experimentation and the fun of cooking, is trying things out. So at the very least, team people up so that they can experiment and see how things go.
what does the expression positive food experiences mean to you?
Well, I would say the optimal positive food experience is that feeling of eating a meal and feeling as if your body has thrived because of it. I like to use the word thrive a lot, because I think that I would say it's fair to say 90% of Americans, if not more, don't actually know what it means to thrive. And I include myself in that statistic a lot, because it's not easy to eat optimally all the time. But when you eat optimally all the time, your body is thriving. And what it feels like to thrive, like the energy that you have, the clarity you have in your mind, it's really amazing. And that takes a little while. It might not be one dinner, but I think you can get a glimpse of that through a really excellent dinner. They say it takes 21 days to break a habit. And that's kind of, for me, I ate clean for like 30 days at one point and really cleaned my system. And I understood, like, I used to rely on coffee all the time. I like ate clean for 30 days. I didn't even need coffee because I was like buzzing. Like, I had so much energy and I felt knew what it felt like to thrive. And again, like, I don't do that on a daily basis. It's not necessarily easy, but I think that is really what I'm after, is getting people that experience of knowing what it's like to thrive, and knowing that you can eat delicious food that you really love and love the experience of eating, and still are providing your body with the nutrients it needs. And then I guess the other one would just be, positive food experiences being surrounding yourself with other people in the act of eating. again, it's, in the age of technology, and I'm guilty of this too. It's so easy to make something a one bowl meal and you turn on Netflix and, you're just eating in front of technology, or, you're not interacting with people. And I think that's fair to say the lack of interaction and the reliance on technology has fed into our political landscape and our, all of these different things that we're facing. And so the positive food experience being bringing people together to cook. I mean, one of my favorites, and this is something actually from our childhood that we used to do, is having sushi nights. And sushi nights are really fun because it's super interactive. Everybody can like make a certain like component of a roll that they want, and it's very hands-on. It takes a little while. And so, gathering a few of your friends and doing a sushi night. I mean, anytime we've done that, whether it was when I was 10 or whether it was just a couple weeks ago, really, people love the experience. I mean, we are social creatures inherently. So, and food is just tied to who we are. So I think blending those two is really powerful in unlocking our pathway to healthier communities, healthy individuals. And so, yeah, anytime that I can get people together and to converse and just hang out through the act of cooking and eating, that's a really positive food experience.
How can you create a positive food experience? I guess whether you're single, whether you have a large family, whether you're somewhere in between, regardless of that circumstance. You mentioned bringing people together, but it's not always possible depending on your situation.
I mean, I guess it depends. So if you're in a situation where you don't have access to other people to cook with and interact with over food, it is finding the joy in the act of cooking just for yourself. And again, I think that gets back to one of the joys of cooking for yourself being that you get to cook whatever you want for yourself. Yeah. And so if I think one of the fun ways of doing that is like, what is something that, like, if you've gone to a restaurant or one of your comfort foods, like what is one of those dishes that you make and you've never tried making for yourself, and the challenge of trying to make it for yourself. And I'm not going to sit here and say that might not be a frustrating experience at times, but just really give it a go. And if you have to try it multiple times, and finding the joy in the process of cooking. So, if you're not with people, I've found music to be a great substitute. Obviously, I have music going on whether there's people there or not. I love cooking for myself and by myself. I use it as a form of relaxation. Chopping itself can be a meditative experience. It's just like saying, I'm going to take this hour or half hour or whatever time block you want and just focus on cooking. And, because you're working with hopefully a sharp knife and fire or heat, it does require your attention. And so in a lot of ways, it can be something where you can really get lost in it. And so turning on some of your favorite music and just enjoying the whole process of it. And whether or not maybe you have a cooking show and you're following along with a recipe or a podcast, or just finding a favorite recipe, or just trying to cook intuitively and creatively, that whole process, again, on an individual level, can be really, really fun. And then the same if you do have people like your family or in a family setting or a large group print, I just encourage people to find something like sushi or tacos, or something where there's multiple components and there's something for everybody. Everybody can make up a taco a different way or a sushi roll a different way. So finding one of those foods that is open to everybody. And it's the very first pop-up dinner I did, I was super nervous because I had no idea if anybody would be interested in this idea or if anybody would show up. And I was like, I did a 5-course dinner for $25, which is pretty ridiculous because of the high quality of it. But I just put the invitation out there and people responded. And, it is, if you're going to invite people, and part of it is just being willing and open to being vulnerable, um, and just putting that invitation out there. And um, every time that I put an invitation out there regarding food, everybody, or at least some amount of people, are always super into it. And that's just because we don't have these experiences as much. And people, I think, want them. So just putting that invitation out there, like, hey, let's do a taco night, like bring whatever you have, and inviting people over, and not feeling like, people, very few people at least, are going to, like, judge what your kitchen looks like, or, all these things that we might be self-conscious about. Just bringing people together, because really what it's about is it's about the interaction with the people you bring together, and the food that you make, and less about anything else. So I absolutely encourage people to just, do an open invite to whether it's friends or family. And if you're by yourself, just finding um, the peace and joy that can come from, making a meal for yourself, and really seeing that as a benefit to you.
Mm-hmm. Sure, definitely. So, how can people get in contact with you?
Well, plantedcuisine.com is the website. And there's a bunch of resources on the website. And then if you want to contact me directly, Loghan, which is Loghan, has an H in there, at plantedcuisine.com is my email. So I'm always happy to talk to anybody about food and food systems, and any of the things that we've talked about. If we're really going to have an impact in the way that we need to with our food system, it's going to take all of us in a lot of different creative ways in executing.